they got, I don't know how many acres now, a couple hundred acres they own or more in the area that the city does. And if they know that we've got another 80 acres that we'd be willing to have turned into industrial ground, they can say we have the ability to pull it together, basically.
Okay. I appreciate your very thorough description. No buildings or structures, it appears, other than the center pivots,
right.
And no easements, and no other underground installation or infrastructure.
Other than what showed up there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We briefly flashed your exhibit. Did you want to pull that up and explain anything else on your exhibit?
I was really just bringing that up to show where the pivots were, the pumps in our buried line, so it's fine.
Okay. And did you want to submit that as evidence?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do any of the parties have any objection? Okay. Thank you. We will admit that exhibit as Oehlerking Exhibit 1, Hearing Exhibit 1. Okay. Exhibit's very flat, so it doesn't appear to have any bodies of water or noteworthy terrain features, no timber or forest, it appears, no easements. I am very curious, though, because we haven't run into this yet.
Mm-hmm.
You do have two properties, actually 3 properties, all with center pivots on them, and we don't see as many center pivots, at least in part of Iowa I live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so why are you utilizing, what's going on with your soil that requires the use of center pivots?
Well, we're trying to maximize the yield, first of all. And it's sandier soil. We don't get the rains as much as you do here in central Iowa. So it makes a difference. And we're trying to maximize our production there. Our family's been irrigating since 1955, I think. There's only 1 year we haven't pumped water. So we find that even in good years, it helps us as well.
Okay. Can you describe any, and actually, I think most of the landowner interveners have used this as an opportunity to really express their feelings and their opinions. And I know you said earlier it's been repeated. We don't have any problem with landowners being repetitive.
Okay.
That's why we're doing this.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that you get a chance to describe any specific concerns you may have and any recommendation you may have for the board to address your concerns. And while when we printed this, that may have been very much directed at citing.
Mm-hmm.
Every other landowner has, and you should very well feel free to expand.
Okay. Well, I guess our objection to the pipeline certainly, as I mentioned earlier, it decreases the value of our land for its true purpose for us. If this was just farmland and we got other farm ground 20 miles farther south out where we know it's never going to be developed, we might have a different opinion. But where this is future, we have concern. We have concern certainly from the safety aspect. If there was a rupture or damage to the pipeline of some sort, what that would do, certainly to the houses that are around it. Because obviously there's a house in each corner, not ours, but somebody lives there. We wouldn't want people to have ill effects or death as a result of any problem there. And so that's a big issue to us. So we take a look at this whole thing, the whole idea of the eminent domain is really important to us. We've had the dubious honor of having about 4 eminent domain situations we've been in over the last several decades. And as a result, my brother and sister and I have heard the story about when my grandfather had to knock on the door from the government, as they say, to come in and take 350 acres from us. That became part of what's now Sioux Gateway Airport. That was in 1941 or 2. And obviously there's a war going on. They would expand the base for training bomber pilots. But they still came in and took 350 plus acres from us and basically paid about the value of the land crop that was standing at that point in time. So that was a true taking at that point in time. They've been back multiple times, took additional parcels to add to the airport. And 10, 12, 15 years ago, they were back and took another 80 acres. So we had experience with eminent domain multiple times. Every one of them, every single one of them was a negative for us as the owner. the payments that were made were nowhere near close to what it's worth. And it creates a generational ill will, if you will. It's something that is part of our heritage, I guess, because it's something that my grandfather just tore him up. My dad, 94 years old, home listening to us today because he couldn't travel. And it's something that he's talked about many, many times. And I'm sure that my brother and sister and I will as well. And if we have to go through this one, our kids will talk about it as well. It's one of those things where it just is ripping part of your body away from you when someone comes in and takes something from you, as opposed to selling a piece of property and getting a fair price for it. That forcing it upon you is just the thing that you can't imagine. As we take a look at it further, I think I'd ask the three of you as the board, think about it. If somebody came up to you and knocked on your door today and said, you know what, I want 15, 20 feet out of your yard. I want to go where I want to. I'm going to go diagonal. I'm going to take a couple trees out of your backyard, and you might have a nice patio. I'm going to go through that. And I'm going to circle around, and maybe nobody have to knock on your garage because I want to go through there for whatever purpose. You'd be mad. You'd probably say, no way. And that's kind of the way we are. We're coming in, some it is, and taking a slice of our property where they want it, when they want it, and really for their price is what they want to do. And that's not fair. If we're selling this entire property, we're going to sell 80 acres at a time, probably. It's not like you go next door for lunch. You buy a pizza, one piece at a time, or you can buy a whole pizza. You know that if you buy one piece, you're going to pay more than if you bought the whole pizza. Here, they'll want to take the average of the county price per acre and apply it to just a little sliver off this one and say, boy, that's a good deal for you. And that's what tears us up, is it coming in, taking the land, and not treating us fairly in our mind, certainly, as well as destroying the value of the rest of the property. We can debate whether the project makes sense or not. We choose to think it doesn't. We can debate the safety of the pipeline, and there's certainly issues that we believe are out there. Is it safer than hauling it on trucks and rail cars? Yeah, probably. But it doesn't make it right when we're all said and done. It is still a questionable use of our land. Especially this line, we're bringing in imported, discarded product from Nebraska. Because about 1.5 miles west of it is what crosses the Missouri River. So everything's going to go through this pipeline is from Nebraska. And all we're doing is, in Iowa, is hosting their trash hauling to South Dakota to North Dakota. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. When I go back, I look at the board's mission statement, vision statement, and those type of things. And it doesn't really seem to fit with what I read there. I look at your vision statement, and it says that the Iowa Utilities Board is valued as a regulatory expert and solution-oriented partner regarding utility issues. We haven't seen a whole lot of solution provided to us. Maybe that's not the purpose of it. Maybe it's all to be a solution for Summit and their counterparts. But as far as providing solutions to us and to give us insight and guidance to help us, it seems like it's lacking. So I think that's a concern for us. So I could go on for a long time, but I won't. So I think one of the key things I'd like to share, and we can go on to other questions, is as the three of you, I expect every day when you go home from these things, first thing you say, oh, that's a long day. Learned a lot. But probably at the end of the night, as you're laying down thinking about what happened today and what's going on the next day, I'd like you to sit down and think about the impacts of what the decisions are that you're making. Because ultimately, the three of you get to decide the future for us and several hundred other people. And as you lay there in bed thinking about how things went today and tomorrow and the next day and all the rest of the periods, why don't you think about down the road 20, 30 years after this thing's been in place, assuming it goes forward. And are you going to be proud of your decision? You're talking to your grandkids or your kids, or just think about your legacy. Are you going to be proud to be the one to stand up and say, yep, I voted, that was the final vote on that one to make it happen for the whole pipeline. I impacted 1,000 people in Iowa, as far as landowners, whatever the number is, and impacted them forever for the short-term gain of a for-profit company that, as I understand, is getting about a 25-year license to use the pipeline, which you're taking away from us forever. I really challenge each of the three of you to think about that type of thing each day as you end these hearings, and as you go on through the rest of it and say, is this the decision I really want to make? And then think about the same question if there happens to be some sort of failure in the pipeline, whether it's on our property or somebody else's, that causes a significant issue. And see how you'd answer that question to yourself at that point in time. I really mean that. I'd like you guys to do that for your own conscience as you look at it. And think about if you were an officer for all the landowners, how you could react to it. So.
I don't have any questions. I feel ashamed to ask a question following that, so I'm going to turn it over to the parties. Mr. Taylor, you're always first, and then Ms. Greenhagen, I see your name placard already.
And I'm never ashamed. I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, did you, on behalf of the Charles Oehlerking Revocable Trust, actually intervene at one point?
I did.
And then what happened?
Well, then I basically ran out of time to get ready. He said, I'm not sure what I'm going to do as an intervener, so we took it off.
Okay. Did you prepare some written pre-filed testimony as an intervener?
I did. I submitted that.
Do you have that with you, by the way?
I do.
Would you like to have that offered as an exhibit?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Do you have copies? Do you have it
I don't.
electronic for us?
It was submitted for the.
We've already got it filed, so we're going to get
Okay.
it pulled up.
Okay. Yeah, as far as adding that in as an exhibit, that's possible to be good.
One second. Before we admit it, we need to allow the parties a chance to object or offer. Are there any objections?
Your Honor, I hesitate to object, but as a matter of process, normally pre-filed testimony comes with the expectation and the opportunity to cross-examine. As our understanding, the intervention was withdrawn. If this is a one-off, I guess I don't have a big objection, but I do want to note for the record that there are some procedural irregularities with that, and it does create some problems. I would hate to see it become a trend or a repeated thing. But having made that record, I will note that it is a mild objection.
Appreciate the mild objection. Hold on real quick. Mr. Dubinsky, I appreciate your mild objection. It is overruled. In this situation, where an intervener has withdrawn, and I've already, we don't anticipate to see this situation very frequently. And I think it's an opportunity, and I appreciate Mr. Dubinsky's mild objection, but we will admit this as Oehlerking hearing exhibit 2. Okay.
Thank you. I won't go through the whole thing, but is that pre-filed testimony still your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And can we go back to the KMZ map? Thank you. Does the red area here encompass all three of your parcels?
Yes, it does.
And it's all in cropland right now?
It's all in cropland.
I wasn't quite clear whether or not...
Your Honor, just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just for clarification, Wally, I believe you had, in an earlier map, you'd indicated all of your property includes a parcel to the north that's not in the red area.
Of what we own is on the north side as well, but it's not part of the pipeline, yes.
Okay, so you're just clarifying.
I'm
that he's-
clarifying, yes.
Okay, we're good. Go ahead.
So, the area in red on the KMZ map is in the business park now, or is it proposed to be in a business park?
It's a business park area. It's not a prescribed start and stop borderline per se.
I guess I'm not sure what a prescribed business park area
And that's
is.
my term. It's just the area that overall they're trying to get as much as 3,000 acres put together, as I understand it.
I think what we're trying to get at, and the chair was trying to get at it too, is what likelihood is there that there would be industrial development on your land?
Well, I think there's a pretty high likelihood. First of all, like I identified, there's several to the north that are already there. They're industrial. If you go to the east about 1.5 miles, the Iowa DOT is in the process of putting in a new interchange on Interstate 29. And it's heavily driven by developing this area, as well as additional growth in the Port Neal area. And if you go another mile or so farther east, we're back to Amy Crow's property that is ahead of me. So all that area is going to be serviced by a new interchange on I-29 that's really designed to be able to handle truck traffic and those type of things for growth. So that's part of the reason we think it's going to happen.
And so this new interchange would be near your property?
It's 1.5 miles east of us, straight east.
And how would that direct traffic toward your property?
Excuse me.
And how would that direct the traffic toward your property?
Well, it would service the traffic. Now, it wouldn't generate traffic in its own right, but as you put in a business here, it would then have access to the interstate to come and go wherever it needed to. It's not like it's drive-by, just happen to stop in. It's when there's a development here that makes it very accessible for a warehouse, for example, to hit the road and get going.
And did you say the city limits of Sioux City come right down to your property?
There's a voluntary easement, or voluntary annexation going on as we speak, right there on the north side of ours.
Okay.
So right on this property right here.
Okay. And has the city of Sioux City indicated what they want to do with that annexed property?
No. Not to my knowledge, anyhow.
Is there any indication that the city would annex your property?
They voluntarily let us in as well, I'm sure.
Is it your understanding that if the pipeline went through your property, nothing could be built on top of it?
Yep, we very much are aware of that.
Is that a concern?
A big concern. And that's part of what I was talking about earlier. If you're coming in there as an industrial property to buy that first 100 feet or so is going to have pretty minimal value to you. Not only can you just grow a lawn on it at that point in time. And that's ground that you're going to talk $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 an acre on, in the not too distant future. And so that has a big impact.
So for right now, you're growing corn and beans on that land.
Correct.
In at least for now, for the foreseeable future, that would be the use of that land.
Correct.
Do you have any concerns about how the pipeline would impact the the soil and the fertility of the land?
As far as the installation of it, yes, we do. This is an area that doesn't have real deep topsoil like some parts of Iowa. So what little topsoil we got to make do with. And so the separation of the soil is going to be very, very important to us. We know that after they put it back, it's not going to be the same. Certainly we've got other farms where we've had trails through the field for various things or different driveways at different times. And decades later, you can still see where they're at. And that was back before we had this heavy equipment going across. It's what we are going to see here. We've got other farms that have pipelines on them that were put in maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. And the methods were different, but the pipelines were a lot smaller and didn't do as much disruption. We can still see where those pipelines are today. When we take a look at satellite images and those type of things of our crops, you can see where some of those lines are, and then maybe 40, 50 years ago that they were put in. So we expect to have crop loss in here for many years.
Are there any tiles on your
No,
property?
there's no tiles at all in this area.
In fact, you have to irrigate, right?
That's right.
Well, you're almost in Nebraska, so I guess that makes
That's right.
sense. I wasn't quite clear of what your concerns were about the irrigation. You had that exhibit.
Okay, so the irrigation system, if you're not familiar, you pump water to the center point of it, and it walks in a circle to irrigate. We have one well that services 3 center pivots. So there's a water line going from the well to each of the center pivots. So if you take a look at this diagram, the blue line is a water line. Our well is there in the center where the red circle is. So if you take a look at that farthest one to the west, on the south end, that water line comes out to the center. There's an electric wire that we bury with it. And so the electric wire powers the center pivot. It's got electric motors on it, and it moves around in a circle. And the water is sprinkled out on it. We alternate we run one of those 3 at a time, but all those blue water lines are pressurized when the well's running. So if you cut any one of those lines, you can't run any of them. You've got a geyser at that point in time. So that's why the installation is very critical to us. It'll be done after season, after the crop's harvested, or we're not going to be able to irrigate. And for that crop year, it's going to make a significant difference in our yields.
So, looking at Exhibit 1, which is on the screen now, where would the pipeline be located?
Right up on the north road, right along the road, basically.
So very near the well.
Right up, as they've drawn it, just right on the well. And that's why I said earlier, the county has told us, nope, you can't do that. You have to be 100 foot from the well. Some are saying, no, we don't. So we don't know who's right. But there's a conflict there. So if they have to move the whole pipeline south 100 feet, then we got a bigger argument. If they jog around it, we got more argument than to start with, because you're just eating up our valuable property every time you move south. And if Summit has to move south, when we're here a few months from now talking about Navigator, it's going to have to be farther south yet. That eats up even more.
So just briefly, where would the Navigator pipeline be in relation?
Their drawing is basically right on top of Summit's right now. There's no communication between the two of them that we can tell of. And so they're essentially going in the same area. We're assuming they'd have to move, if Summit's there first, we're assuming Navigator would have to move south 50 or 100 feet. We don't know, but that's our assumption.
Are you concerned about the safety risks of the pipeline?
Yeah, we are. Unlike the other people that have been talking, we don't live close to it, so it's not our safety as our homes, but there's 4 homes around it. There's several others in the area, so we certainly are concerned for them and for the overall community. Like I was showing earlier, we reach out close to the Sioux City Airport, city of Sergeant Bluff. On the edge of the airport is where their National Guard has their fuel tankers that fly all over the world, supplying fuel to military planes. So if you had a real terrible event, you could reach up to there, or it could reach the south to CF Industries, large fertilizer, urea plant, and impact that as well as the houses around.
Where would the nearest emergency personnel come from?
The nearest ones would be Sergeant Bluff volunteer group. Depending on the situation, they might come from the Sioux City Airport or the city of Sioux City, but the official ones would be Sergeant Bluff. It's about 3 miles, 3 miles. It's a volunteer group.
And how far is Sioux City?
It's to the fire department. It's probably 5 miles, 6 miles.
You said that you had some conversation with summit representatives.
We have.
You know how many times?
Well, not near as many as they recorded on their document. There's a lot of those that I don't think we had conversations, but we probably talked to them 5 in person, sit down with the meeting 3 times, 4 times. There's been a number of phone calls and emails. We haven't been chasing them off the property, that type of thing. We've been trying to be businesslike as we approach it. We told them from day one, we don't want it. And like I said earlier, we've got commercial ground to sell, not farm ground. We've had conversations with them in the last 3 months, I suppose. One of the representatives came and knocked on my door at my house in Clyde and talked to us for a little bit. But and then I submitted a series of questions to them, and they really didn't answer them for the most part.
So they weren't very helpful?
I would say they were pretty evasive.
Did you have any meaningful discussions with them at all?
Well, we talked through the easement at a high level. We sat down and went through it and looked at their proposal on what they would pay. And I told them, no, go back to the drawing board. We're close to enough. And that's about as far as we got.
Is any of your property in any kind of a government program or conservation program?
It's no conservation programs. It's the normal commodity programs and crop insurance, but that's it.
So why have you not signed an easement?
Well, first of all, you don't really want them on our property is the main thing. And then second of all, if the price was right, we would probably would ultimately sign. But again, at commercial rates, not at farm rates. We know it's going to be sold. If they want to be the owners of 80 acres, we'd sell them 80 acres. We don't want to sell them 4 or 5.
And Summit never came up with a money that you thought was appropriate?
No, they're using county average for all of Woodbury County for the value of the land. And of course, they first gave us that proposal 18 months, 2 years ago when it was started. So that data is probably 4 years old now from when it was created. Farmland in Woodbury County certainly has gone up a lot. And their average, as always, is the best of the worst and the worst of the best. So their average price is a quarter or less of probably what you take to buy farmland in this area, and maybe a third. For commercial land, it's maybe, a fifth what it should be, or more, or bigger difference anyhow. As we take a look at it, I mentioned that the zoning that's in place on this area here allows solar farms. We've been approached by 3 or 4 organizations wanting to put solar farms in. One of the things we've learned from that is multiple things. First of all, there's an easement that you give them. It has an end date. And it's, it may be 40 years down the road, but at least it's got an end date. When they're done, they pick up all their stuff and leave. You don't have any sign of it left. In the interim, they're paying you every year a much better rate than what this is proposed to be. It goes up every year as well.
What does?
The payment that they make as a solar farm goes up every year. Additionally, what we learned is that if you have an easement, just like this one, if we say we want to put that 80 acres in a solar farm, where that easement is, they don't pay as much. They pay about 15 or 20% of what they would if it didn't have an easement there. So anytime there's a pipeline or telephone line or hazardous pipeline underneath the solar farm for that area, they pay you less. And so that's about our best estimate of the impact of what this pipeline is going to have to us. You get about, on an annual basis, about 6 times as much from a solar farm where they can put the glass in and generate income versus an area that has somebody else's easement on it because they can't use it, they can't build on it. And so that gives us a good proxy for, the impact that a pipeline easement has to us in a negative sense, if that makes sense to you.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Greenhagen?
Thank you. Hi. My name is Chris Greenhagen.
Hi.
I'm here representing the Iowa Farm Bureau in the proceedings today, so I have a few questions for you. You filed like 4 or 5 comments in the record?
Correct.
Did you file any more than that?
I think there's some more in there that didn't show up for some reason. I tried searching last night and the old ones didn't seem to come up.
Are Charles and Barbara, those your parents?
They are.
Okay, and so the comments that they filed would also be
Right.
part of the family properties. Okay. And then I think there's a comment, on, at least one on Cobar.
Right.
That would be
That's us
related
as
to your
well.
property as well. Okay. Thank you. One item that I think was mentioned in your father's comment that you haven't discussed today is he mentioned something that he would like a bonding requirement.
Correct.
Have you talked with him about that? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so really what we want to make sure is that whoever owns the easement, someone's going to start with it, we don't expect them to keep it forever, is to make sure that whoever owns it has the strength to follow through on what the commitments are within the easement. We don't know whose son it is. In my prior life, I was in a business where we did lots of retail financing and leasing. If I was going to lease you a lawnmower or a tractor, we want to know who you were, make sure you could pay us back and you could fulfill your obligations. We would like to see the same thing on the pipeline. We have no clue if someone can live up to their promises. We have no clue what the next owner can do. And that's where the bonding or whatever methodology to assure that the leaseholder lives up to their obligations that keep us whole from liability, but also as far as the ongoing commitments to maintain the property and the pipeline and all those sorts of things. We think it's only fair that we as landowners know who it is that we're dealing with. And not just, okay, it's Summit LLC based out of Delaware, but who's the owners? Again, if I was leasing you a $500,000 tractor, I'm going to want to know who's behind Cobar Inc. if it was us, or buying it. We get nothing on that, of course. As we look down the road, one of my fears is end of the life of the pipeline. They say, well, we can just abandon it in place. Or if there's a problem, they could sell it to any kid walking down the street with $20 in his pocket. Now he's the owner. Got nothing behind him, no ability to fulfill the obligations. There's nothing to prevent it. And so we're taking all the risk in the long run, is our concern. That's what Ted has put in his comments. Okay.
So you talked a little bit about abandoning in place. Would you like the option of asking, if it was not used any longer, would you like the option of asking them to remove the pipe?
Yeah, we very definitely want that option, and our option, to take it out. And we also believe that it should not be the forever easement. This pipeline's got a finite life, and that certainly, from what I understand, the permit to operate it has a finite life. If, as it's been proposed to us or explained to us, it is only for a CO2 pipeline and nothing else that can go in there, is what we've been told by Summit reps. And the fiber optic is only tied to the pipeline. In my mind, if 20 years from now, we're no longer using the pipe, the easement should come back to us automatically, right then and there. They don't need to keep it for another 100 years. It's not going to do them any good. And that's whether the pipe comes out or not. If it's not in use, the land should come back to us. and the various rights that go with it.
Is there a farm tenant on the property, or do one of your siblings?
My brother farms it
Your brother farms it.
with his son.
Is he leasing it then, or what?
Yeah, there's a lease to him.
Okay. When you were talking to Mr. Taylor, you mentioned that you expected crop loss for many years. If that crop loss continued on past that 5-year period, would you want Summit to compensate you for that crop loss reduction?
Yes, we will. Yeah, I think it's vaguely in there that they would if you request it, but it's not very clear or definitive.
And then, did you receive the packet of information in the notice for the hearing?
The big postcard type thing.
Not the postcard. There would have been a mailer talking about eminent domain and.
I think we did, yes.
Okay. Would staff mind pulling up one of the Exhibit H's?
Yes, we got the Exhibit H.
You did get the Exhibit H's. Okay, then you don't need to pull it up. Thank you. So you've seen
Yes,
the
I've
Exhibit
seen that
H.
for sure. Yeah.
Have you read through that?
Right.
Okay. So are you familiar with where the Exhibit H says that they want to route the pipeline?
Yeah, anywhere they want, basically, is what it says. And that's one of the issues we have as well, is that within the easement itself and then the Exhibit H, it appears to give the rights to the whole 80 acres between the two ownerships. The one, I forget which letter it is, but one of the exhibits with the lease or the easement does talk about, the 50-foot and that type of thing. But it's not absolute or clear where they're going to go. When I asked the question of Summit in my list of questions I referenced earlier, whether that would be defined in the final lease document, the response was yes, and that would be. And I also asked about their access to it, and he assured me that they would, in our case, require that they could only access it from the two roads on the east and the west, not coming crossways. And that's the type of definition we need. That's not what we get from the field reps who don't seem to know a whole lot, or just reading the easement raw and cold.
So if the board decides to grant the permit, would you want to make sure those provisions were in there?
Oh, definitely. We've got lots more questions that we've accumulated as it goes to the easement that before we sign it, that have to be addressed with our attorney and the Summit people.
So would you like the opportunity to negotiate an easement if the pipeline permit is granted?
Yeah, if it's granted, we're going to have to find a solution.
And would you want Summit to offer the best terms in compensation that they offered to other landowners at that time?
You want the best out of the whole 2,000 acres, 2,000 miles.
That's fair. And you've already talked about access. And, do you know what size pipe that Summit is proposing to put into your
It's kind of, let's make a deal by the looks of things. The lease says up to 24 inches. The Exhibit H, I think, says 12, and the one of the exhibit that we've got says 16. So pick a number, I think, is the answer. We really don't know what's really going to be there.
Would you like the easement to be specific about what size pipe?
Absolutely. Before we sign it, it's got to be very specific that it's one and only pipe, and this is the size.
And if Summit wanted to move the pipeline to another part of your property, would you expect them to acquire a different easement from you?
Absolutely. Second one costs more.
And if they needed to change the grade of your property during or after construction, would you want them to consult with you before doing that?
Very definitely. In our case, it's flat, about like this tabletop, so there better not be much grade change.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Thank you. One of your earlier comments you pivoted away from, so I'd like to expand on it. You made a comment that 3 years is not enough. I assume that's a reference to the compensation that's potentially been offered by Summit to cover crop loss. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Why is that not enough?
Well, we believe that the damage will last longer than that. From our experience in other times when things have been dug up, we look around at other farms, whether it's been an old building site where something was dug up, or a trail, or whatever. It takes more than 3 years to recover from digging a hole. And we see in our own work where we bury irrigation pipe, we can see where that is for several years beyond that. Much smaller, a lot lighter. That's just a trench, no heavy equipment. And you can still tell it for years. And there's settling and those type of things. We expect this one with heavy equipment to be a bigger impact.
I think you mentioned that you had looked at aerials at one point and could see past historical lines from disruption of the soil that had dated back to about 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
Did I hear that right? Okay. We've had testimony, over the last 2 days that basically people have mentioned, it could be several years to forever where it's, disruptions to your soil won't be resolved. Are you somewhere closer to the never be resolved? And
It's hard to tell for sure. We've never experienced this type of disruption of our soil, where they're going to push the topsoil off. And what they told us would take 160 to 180 days on our property to complete the project. So it's going to be moved and removed and worked on in the mud and the rain and the snow and put back together. We don't know what that will be. We know this, like I mentioned earlier, we don't have a lot of topsoil to lose here. So the more you mess it up, the more you compact it below, and sift out the topsoil we got and put it back, it's going to be an impact for a long time. I don't know whether that's 5 years, 25 years.
you had also mentioned that I think I heard it correctly, that you hoped that if this pipeline was to be put on your property, that they would do it in the fall.
Certainly we're not growing a crop.
And you understand from the easement agreement that you've seen to this point that's been offered to you that you don't really have any say on
That's
that.
right. They're going to go when they want to. One of the questions that we haven't got an answer to is, let's say they start tomorrow. They're not going to be done in this crop year. Cold, hard winter. They may not finish up until the next crop year. When does year one of the 3 years start? That's not defined. In that scenario, let's say that they did start in August. Destroy this year's crop, prevent next year's crop from being planted in a timely manner. We expect 2 year ones in that case, and then start the counting.
In 2 year ones, what does that mean?
That means 100% payout of what the value of the crop was.
All right, thank you. So coupled with the fact that you don't really have any discretion over when they start the project,
Right.
Combined with everything else, I won't go through it all, of course, because you laid it pretty much all out with the questions I was planning to ask you. Would it be reasonable? Would it be true that there really isn't a resolution to those problems when it concerns your land and an easement with addressing some of the things that Farm Bureau brought up? That just doesn't work for you. Is that fair?
If I maybe try that again, make sure I understand you.
Maybe it wasn't a great question. So, with all the risks and everything that you understand of the burdens placed on you by the easement agreement, would it be fair to say that there really isn't a remedy for an easement agreement to satisfy you?
It'd be very, very difficult, yes.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Burns.
Yes, Mr. Oehlerking, just a few things that I want to ask about. And if I could get that map that we have up right now, if you could just zoom out. I'm just curious on some other things in the area. It looks like there's an enormous amount of activity in this region.
Yes, there is.
If we could just go to the south, I'm just curious what a couple things are. So if we go to the south and we go to the east, and there's I'm not sure what that says, something USA.
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
Yeah, right there. What is that facility?
Gelita, that's an outfit that takes as I understand it, it's a manufacturing plant that takes offal from packing plants and turns it into gelatin and those type of things. It's a pretty sizable operation.
And then if we continue to go to the south, and we'll just stop at the first facility here.
So that's CF Industries. That large building that runs east and west there, as I understand it, that's where they store urea. Pretty explosive stuff in the wrong combination. I think that building's, don't quote me, I think it's around a quarter of a mile long. It's a big building.
Okay, and then if we keep going south.
Farther south is the mothball Port Neal power plant right there next to it.
So a coal-powered facility?
Coal plant. Farther south, and don't give me, I can't tell you the exact order, but there's AGP, soybean processing plant down there, Koch Industries, another power plant that is active, and there's other stuff I can't remember what else down there.
It's active.
It's active.
Okay.
And it's right along the Missouri River, all along there.
Okay. All right. And then if we can go back up to, I believe it was Highway 29.
Yeah,
So is the interchange already under construction?
no,
It's not.
it's proposed to start, I think, in 26.
So with our hand here, or the pointer, can you show me where that proposed interchange is going to happen?
Amy Crow that was here would probably better explain it because it's going right by her house. My understanding is it's coming across right in between these two houses and going over to this way, to Highway 75. So it'll be an interchange right here, south of 235th Street, in that area. It will go across this field and over in there somewhere, and then go on Highway 75. And there'll be an interchange onto Interstate 29 right there.
And then to the west side, approximately, I mean, it's a slanted road.
Yeah, I think it gets here at Port Neal Road and then jogs north a little bit to 235th, I think.
Okay, but in that vicinity
Yeah,
anyway.
I general area.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, and maybe you mentioned this and I just didn't catch it, taking a lot of notes here. How deep are your irrigation lines?
I think they're 5 feet. I'm not sure.
Okay. Get below the frost line.
Oh yeah, they're in that 5 to 6 foot range. So we'd expect this to be below that. That's what we'd want.
And Mr. Oehlerking, I kind of asked, so yesterday, I don't know if you watched any of the witnesses yesterday. We had an individual here from Charles City, from Floyd County, and there's an industrial park. Mm-hmm. And the proposed pipeline is to go through that industrial park. One of the questions I had for him, and I've been part of these projects as well, where, you know, in our community we try to create a shovel-ready site and whatnot, and there's a whole checklist of infrastructure that they would like you to have. And so one of the things I asked that individual yesterday is, you know, are these pipelines becoming, is there a chance it becomes part of the infrastructure? Is it something that's, you know, could actually be beneficial to your facility or to your land as development occurs? Have you had, and then my question to him yesterday was, did you have a conversation with, you know, Summit on, could there be a potential, if that pipeline were to go through your land, and it's going to be developed for industrial or manufacturing someday, and you have a manufacturer that actually wants to sequester their carbon, is there an opportunity on that facility where you could, or they could make it so you could inject carbon into the pipeline, or maybe it's a company that actually needs to use carbon, whether you could withdraw carbon off that pipeline? Has that conversation happened with them at all?
We've had no conversation on that, and I'm sure the people we've talked to would have no clue.
Okay. But you did, it does sound like in your negotiation process, you did have a sit-down meeting and some back-and-forth conversation.
Yeah, we've had 2 or 3 with Summit. We've had some with navigators that kind of run together after a while, but we've had multiple sit-downs with them.
And did you ever counter-offer back to them then?
We have not yet.
Okay, all right. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I had one additional question. I don't think we asked if you had any proposed alternative routes for the line, if it were to be permitted.
Well, our simplest alternative is just say no. from a location of the pipeline. And I guess I'd add into that, if you ultimately can't say no to the whole thing, our request would at least say no to eminent domain. You can say, okay, go ahead with the pipeline. Don't give them eminent domain. If this program is so valuable and so successful, they got 70% of the company, people that want it. Go find the other 30%, pay them what they want, put it somewhere else. If we had to, we've had some discussion, move the line to the south edge of our property. Selfishly, that's a good deal for us, but it puts right in the backyard of 2 houses. That's about the only choice you got here. We don't want it through the middle of the field. So it's got to be on the top or the bottom.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Oehlerking, you're excused. Thank you. Appreciate it.